Schools often boast inclusivity and safe learning spaces, but how often are they delivering for students of varying identities and or genders? Ticker Ed starts right now. Hello and welcome back to Ticker Ed, where we will be looking at the changing face of education and examining the way we teach, listen and learn. Ticker Ed is backed by Enquiry Tracker, who are the all-in-one solution for schools to easily manage their future families. You can of course find out more over at enquirytracker.net. And remember folks that whilst Enquiry Tracker is the presenting sponsor of our program today, the opinions and statements expressed in the following segment are of course our own. And joining me as always is my regular co-host and founder of Enquiry Tracker, Greg Campitelli. Thank you so much for joining me, Greg.
Always a pleasure, Mike.
Greg, it's interesting how we tend to view gender debate as a bit of a current issue, you know, a very modern issue, but is that truly the case?
Well, not really. It's for me, in terms of the historical perspectives, aren't always what they appear to be.
Yeah.
So I think of my mum. She was at an all-girls school in Star of the Sea in Melbourne in the 30s, and she insists that the nuns were in fact the very first feminists she ever met. You know, they were very much into female empowerment, very much into work and education, and not the image that perhaps many of us would have of Catholic nuns of the early 20th century. That said, those times were simpler in some respects. It was a more defined era. We had titles such as Mr. and Mrs. We had a binary male-female relationships. We had the nuclear family as we understood it to be.
Nuclear family, I've not heard that phrase.
Well, that's the old classic mum, dad and two kids, it's
White picket fence?
Yeah,
there we
absolutely.
go. So we're obviously living in a much more diverse and inclusive changing dynamic with relationships to how people refer to themselves.
Absolutely.
You talked about Mr. and Mrs. there, of course, and that's expanding.
Absolutely, absolutely.
How's this being expressed in education?
Well, there's two big issues for me. Firstly, there's the issue of inclusivity in education, and especially with regards to the LGBTQIA+ community.
Good stuff.
And this is in education from a parent, a staff and a student perspective. Our special guest will explore this in a little bit more detail for us. The second's a wee bit more operational. It's but still fundamentally about identity.
Okay, so can you elaborate, and I guess what do you mean by that, Greg?
Yeah, I know. So for example, think about something as basic as pronouns, right?
Yep.
So how people identify themselves and how they want to be identified by others. I'm talking about simple pronouns. We lack them in English language. Think about a student, he, him, she, her. If they don't want to be referred to by gender pronouns, what are we left with? It? Not acceptable. And think of, say, a parent in terms of salutations. We've got universal pronouns like doctor and professor, but very few of us are doctor or professor. So then we're left with gender-based definitions. Mr., Mrs., Miss, again, all based on gender.
Yep.
And for example, women, for example, we define their gender often by marital status, something that we don't do to men. I know one school, for example, Mike, where they're offering MX as a salutation, which doesn't have a gender bias. So, just put MX so they don't want to reveal gender. So attitudes in this space are changing.
They're definitely changing, and it's great to see. And you're right, with of course the first country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage being the Netherlands 20 years ago.
20 years.
Good on them. What does that represent, I suppose, when it comes to family life? What's the change there that you're seeing?
Well, yes, we're managing students' relationships with their parents based on gender. We often talk about your mum or your dad.
Correct.
All right. But that has a very significant impact for same-sex couples. I know, for example, one student, because we operate in the education space with Enquiry Tracker, I know one student management system that schools use to manage relationships with families, where you've got to enter it in two parents. One has to be a mother, and the other has to be a father. Well, that's just not good enough.
Yeah.
And there's validity though in schools asking what gender are the students who are coming into the school. They want to ask whether for a co-ed school might want to ask get their male-female balance right.
Correct.
They might be looking at amenities and so forth, but they've got to be more adaptive. They've got to use more inclusive practices in their language, and they've got to be more considerate of the family dynamics. Single-sex families, same-sex couples, people who don't want to reveal their gender. So when we're asking male-female, we might also have to ask non-binary or non-declared, or something similar.
Right. So it's definitely something that's changing,
Absolutely.
and it's it's not going to stop, which is great.
That's
What about from a staff student perspective, I suppose, when it comes to once you're enrolled and
Okay, so firstly, what I want to really emphasise here, we're not dealing with a problem. This is an evolving conversation.
That is such a great way to put it.
It's not a problem.
It's not a problem. That is such a great way to put it.
It's an evolving, maturing conversation where we need to educate ourselves. For example, let me give you two examples, Mike. I know an all-boys school where a boy is transitioning currently to a girl, and I know an all-girls school where a girl is transitioning to a boy. This is not unique to Australia. We are seeing this globally. Some countries more advanced than others. And what's very important is the education to the staff and the students and the families about that inclusivity, and about it affects your language, how you speak to students, and of course about dress codes with schools who have uniforms. What do we look at about dress? So I think this is a perfect opportunity perhaps to bring in our special guest.
Let's do it. And guys, joining us today is Anne Hollonds, Australia's National Children's Commissioner over at the Australian Human Rights Commission. Anne, thank you so much for your time today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And just to start, can you talk to us about what you see as the major issues that schools are facing in terms of gender and diversity?
Well, look, as Greg has sort of outlined already, I mean, I think that society is changing. We're in a process of change, and schools and the education system are a very, very important part of that society, especially for children and young people. And you know, understanding that gender identity is not a fixed binary thing, and that we need to be able to respect the diversity of gender that kids identify with, and to have our school systems and our processes to be able to support that and respect and affirm the gender of all the students that attend, and to ensure that school is a safe place for kids. That's the important thing here. As Greg said, it's not a problem we're dealing with. It's about showing respect to who these children are.
Absolutely, and I love that turn of phrase you just used about you can't learn if it's not safe. You know, in terms of, let's think about this through perhaps the three tiers of education. You know, the younger education through kindergarten, through primary school, through secondary school and university. Are we seeing sort of changes in the way schools and families have to adapt or make sure they're being included in these spaces? Can you unpack that a little for us, please, Anne?
Well, obviously it's different according to the age of the child and the involvement of the parents and so forth, from one end of the education system to the other. But I think it's actually, you know, there are a lot of similarities there. And, you know, I guess my experience has been mostly talking to kids in the high school years, where they will talk about feeling discriminated against, feeling that they don't belong, feeling misunderstood, not respected, and asking for schools to step up, really, for teachers to be better trained and better supported, and also to provide for schools to be a place where parents can also be educated. So unfortunately, a lot of kids are finding that they're having to educate their own parents, right? And so I think we as a society could be doing a whole lot better by ensuring that our schools are equipped to support kids on all of those fronts.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about the parents' involvement in this as well, and it's very important to think about their involvement as well. But Anne, what could schools maybe be doing when it comes to being more mindful and taking gender equity and diversity into account? We've sort of unpacked a few things there, but let's just clarify what the schools could be doing.
Well, I think the school, it all comes down to school leadership at the end of the day, setting a standard that goes, you know, we're going to have a culture of respect. We want this place to be a safe and affirming place for all of our kids, no matter who they are, what gender they identify with, we want to affirm them for who they are. So therefore, you've got to have your systems and structures in place to welcome everyone. And that goes to the sorts of procedures, the way that the kids are referred to, the way that teachers treat them, having the facilities organised properly, and to do it in a way that doesn't go, we're trying to kind of fix a problem, as Greg said. We've got to make sure that this is done in a way that's very positive, very constructive, very inclusive of all. And really it comes from the top, from the school leadership, the system that school is operating under, so the broader system, teachers that are supported, and then having a sort of a whole of community approach to it that brings in families as well and in the community. So look, this is not an easy sort of, I guess, step up if people are feeling that they don't understand or they don't feel equipped. But there's a lot that we can do through our education systems to equip the schools and the school leadership and the teachers to really take those steps to, at the end of the day, it is all about just respect and safety and recognising, I think one of the things here is we need to understand the role of schools. Schools are not just a place of academic learning. We've seen that through the COVID lockdowns where, you can't just replace everything by using Zoom.
100%.
Schools are a place where the well-being of the kids has to be supported as well. That's what we're really talking about here.
Well, it's an exciting conversation to have. And Anne, I want to thank you for coming on the program and unpacking some of this with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Easy done, Greg. See, we could talk about this a lot further. We've obviously run out of time, but Greg, thank you again.
Absolute pleasure again, Mike. What an important issue. It's education for all of us, isn't it?
100%. That's the thing.
You and I are being educated. Our audience is being educated. I hope our audience at home got a real education today about using more inclusive language. We can all do a lot better. And Anne has shared with some terrific insights.
Small steps go a long way. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program today and talking about the ins and outs of the education sector in relation to gender and identity. And of course, please check out the team at Enquiry Tracker. If you would like to learn more about how your school can use this amazing software, head over to enquirytracker.net. And don't forget to head over to tickeroriginals.co for more episodes of Ticker Ed. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you again soon.